Welcome to Locked On Nuggets. I'm your host, Matt Moore. You can find me on Twitter at HP Basketball. Join me, Adam Mares from DNVR, world's finest, as we talk about all manner of things today. We'll talk about free agency. We'll talk about the top 5 things that we're concerned about as the NBA season is a go. The NBA and the NBPA agreed to terms this week starting on December 22nd. We are going to have a season. There's going to be free agency starting November 20th. Training camp starts December 1st. I am in no way prepared for this, but a good way for me to get my energy up is with Built Bar. They're our presenting sponsor today. Make sure to go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON to get $10 off at BuiltBar.com. All right, Adam. So I've heard a lot of stuff lately. Like the rumor mill is already going.
Yeah, it's going, and I'm telling you, I think it's going to be picking up too. You look at it. So we are exactly 3 weeks away from training camp, and in between there, we are 5 days away from trades, 7 days away from the draft, 9 days away from free agency. Like you saw the Chris Paul thing come out today from Woj and Windhorst. I just think that the next week we're going to buckle up. I think it's here. It doesn't feel like it's here, but it is here.
Yeah. I'm still trying to like gear myself up because I'm used to like the rhythms of like, there's like a long dead period. And or it's like there's the draft and then there's free agency and then there's a dead period. And then it's like, oh, guys are starting to come into camp. And now it's like, we're all going to do it all together in 3 weeks. And it's going to be a lot to deal with. We'll talk about how that's going to shake out in the second and third segment. But I did want to talk about a couple of things I've heard. So the list of Jrue Holiday suitors is very long. Brooklyn, the Clippers, the Mavericks, the Nuggets are just among some of the teams that I've heard that are interested in Jrue Holiday. So the price on Holiday is likely going to be steep, which reduces, I think, even more the chances of such a deal happening. I think if it happens for the Nuggets, it's going to have to be that they sneak in on draft night with some sort of offer. I talked to Mike Singer on this show the other day, and I want to get your reaction to this. He actually mentioned that Bol might be part of a package to acquire Jrue Holiday. I want to see if you had any thoughts on that concept.
I mean, I think it's fair. The idea of it is correct. You know, Bol's value right now that's what his value is. He might. I'm so high on the odds that he becomes a good player, but the odds that anybody becomes a good player are very low when they're a rookie. I mean, that's just the truth of it. The 4th overall pick this year, the odds that they actually turn out to be a star player are going to be very, very low. So Bol, given all of the variables, I still think it's low. And right now, you know, I think that it makes sense that he would be involved. That's fair. And I think it makes sense that Denver, if that was the roadblock, you had to include him. And the other pieces you guys talked about on that show, Gary Harris and or Will Barton, maybe Monte Morris, a first-round draft pick. Like, to me, that's the framework of a fair trade, and I think if I'm Denver, you'd have to do it.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous to trade a guy with that much upside. There's a lot of downside, I think, with Bol, just in terms of like there's a lot of skeptics in terms of maneuverability on defense, basic body strength, durability, obviously being a big question. But I think with the talent, I would be a little bit concerned that it's like, oh man, can you believe Bol is like, I would just be very concerned of giving up on, especially for a guy for 1 year of Holiday, especially for a player that I don't project as like, he's not, if we're doing like, Seth Partnow's tiers, he's not in that level 1 tier. So
right.
I think that matters.
Neither is Jokic apparently, so I guess that's not saying that.
That's a topic for another day. Other things that I have heard, I think Spencer Dinwiddie is going to get a lot of traction on the market. Local guy, Colorado. And so he's going to get a lot of attention. The Mavericks are interested in him, as are the Clippers. But also there's a big number of other teams that are chasing Dinwiddie. The Hawks have interest. There's a number of them. Obviously tonight you mentioned reported Chris Paul. There's talks of him and the Suns with potentially Ricky Rubio, Kelly Oubre being part of a deal. I had heard that Kelly Oubre is definitely being shopped. So if the Nuggets are looking for a wing addition, that might not be a bad idea to see if they can't sneak in and for a low price as kind of a facilitator type deal. If they were able to add it, like I would love to get Oubre, I think on the Nuggets. I think it'd be a big addition for them. Coming off the bench as a wing defender that can shoot, a guy that can run the floor and catch Jokic lobs or like those full court passes. Not like you don't want to give up anything significant in any sort of deal there, but Oubre is a guy I really like as a role player rotation piece. And but you know, OKC may just take him as a reswapability thing.
Right.
OKC's likely, it looks like, taking a step back, so that's good for the Nuggets in the Northwest Division. I think that's the Nuggets angle there.
That's one team. That means Phoenix would be taking a step forward, so they just replace them. I mean, it is a little bit of an in one hand out the other. So I look at that season, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the coming segments. But I look at it, and I just go, one of the things that's dangerous about Denver not getting Jrue Holiday is that somebody else gets him, and if that's a Western Conference team, that's just more competition.
Yeah, and I think that I reported this last week that there's a lot of executives that are nervous about the tax structure, and Shams reported that, and I think it was Tim Bontemps as well, there's an alleviation of the tax penalties coming.
Right.
Both this year and in future seasons to offset the COVID losses. This is going to be problematic for the league because they did it in response to league owner concerns about losing money, et cetera, et cetera. But the result of that's going to be Steve Ballmer is just going to be like, go get them all. Go get everyone.
Yeah. What other owners? So Steve Ballmer, because he has very deep pockets. Is there any other owners that you think might take that approach of, we're getting a discount on spending crazy this summer?
Yeah, I think the Lakers are one that will definitely at least look at it. But they may wind up using on a Kuzma extension because Jeannie Buss likes him a lot. Like they're close. So there's a relationship there between owner and player, and I think that matters. And I think the Knicks are probably going to be another one that goes that route because they've got new ownership or new management rather that wants to make a splash and wants to try and use what they've got. That I think is possible. The Wizards wouldn't surprise me if they did some stuff if they actually ramped up a little bit of spending. Leonsis isn't gun shy. Like he's smart, so he will take advantage of certain situations that are afforded to him. And I think Dallas, honestly, because I don't think Cuban sweats the tax at all. Like if you're looking at the teams that you have to worry about making big jumps in the Western Conference this offseason, I would say that the biggest two are the Phoenix Suns and the Dallas Mavericks. Those are two teams that definitely feel like they have a chance to really compete, and it seems like they're aiming to do so.
Warriors as well, but I know you just assume they were in there already.
Yeah, the Warriors have already got like number 2 in the Western Conference. It's interesting. There's been talk of the Warriors adding Jrue Holiday, and I don't really get that. Like Steph, Jrue, Clay does make some level of sense. Klay Thompson can obviously play the small forward spot. It just feels like a weird it just feels strange to me, and especially feels weird to go smaller when you know you're going to have to deal with the Lakers. Like that's an interesting kind of point. Oh, and the final thing, this doesn't really have anything to do with the Nuggets. Do you know who the biggest, the big that everyone's after is? Guess.
Blake Griffin? I don't know.
Christian Wood.
Oh, he's a good player. This doesn't surprise me at all. He's a really good player. Good young player too, so there's upside. You can talk yourself into it.
Yep, former process sixer. A lot of teams.
Not really.
A lot of teams are getting in on the ground floor and trying to get him. There's been just a lot of noise about Christian Wood. I've heard like 7 different teams linked to interest in Christian Wood. So
I've heard Nuggets fans interested in him. I never thought it was a possibility, but Nuggets fans will find it interesting because there were some people that said, "Well, why not this guy? Why doesn't Denver go after him?" If I'm sensing in your tone a little bit here, Matt, you sound less. I don't want to say optimistic because I don't know that you care one way or another, but less optimistic that the Nuggets get a deal done to get Jrue Holiday. Like I feel like you think, relative to where you were a week ago, you feel like it's less likely.
Yeah, because I have heard so much about the level of interest in him and how many teams are trying to put together packages. Like I would imagine David Griffin's call sheet's very long.
Right.
And I just don't think that Denver can really, if there's an open market and you have a GM that's discerning, and Griffin definitely is, I don't think that if Beal asks out, I think that there's like a chance for a sweetheart deal there because of the relationship between Conley and Shepherd. Right. Conley and Griffin, as far as I know, get along and have always gotten along and have a good relationship. But as far as I know, they're not close. And so I don't expect that. Like this really is stuff that winds up mattering. Yeah. Ownership relationships matter too, Right. So I think that all these things kind of factor into the conversation as well.
So Chris Paul is not a surprise to me, that move, Phoenix talking to him. Not that that's a done deal, but that just kind of shows that I think Chris Paul's probably gone. I've heard Blake Griffin, as a guy that maybe is on the move. But outside of that, I haven't heard any names yet. Are you hearing buzz is there any names that you think are not on the radar right now, or do you think that's coming in the next couple of days?
I mean, look, Beal, I think is the one that you really have to keep your eye on. That's the one that I think you have to really track, because I would imagine that he's eventually gonna be in conversations. The Bulls want to compete right now, and what teams are trying to figure out is whether or not that means that they're willing to move off of Levine. Like, if you want to compete, do you want to keep LaVine, or do you want
to compete? I think you want to move LaVine.
Do you want to move LaVine to try and compete? Thad Young is definitely available for cheap.
Okay.
That's one thing that you definitely can do.
It's your guy.
So anyway, yeah, it's my guy. I love him. It's Laurie Markkanen, actually, there's a little bit of conversation about too. But in general, there's a lot of, I mean, look, it's more active than maybe I thought it was going to be. I think we're going to see more trades than we are going to see big free agency moves. Just because the market's just not that big. Like, there's just not a lot of like really big free agents, and teams are going to be shy about giving out deals, not knowing what the future is going to look like. The players that are, I will say this, players that are on longer contracts, I think are going to have more value because they're going to want to know what the guy is making, and know how long that they have him, and have it be like, oh, he expires in 2 years versus 4, when they have maybe a better idea of stuff. So it's like, you don't want the full 4 years, but you also don't want like 1 year deals. You want something in the middle.
Okay.
That's one of the things that I've kind of heard. Let's take a break, and when we come back, you have some concerns, which I think are good to talk about. Let's talk about some concerns about this upcoming season. We'll talk about that when we return on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for making us part of your day. Really appreciate all the support. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Nuggets. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. It helps us out so much with all things Locked On. So, Adam, you have a list of 5 things that you're concerned about this NBA season. We're going to talk about those things with the season set to kick off on December 22nd, 2020. Under great circumstances, no reason to be concerned whatsoever about the state of the world. Everything is going swimmingly. I can't imagine what you're concerned about. Let's get started.
So I am concerned, Matt, and it's funny because I feel like there's concerned fatigue leading up to the bubble. I think everybody was concerned about everything. You don't want to go out of your house, and the bubble, it's never going to work, and this, that. Then they pulled it off. And we maybe through so many things happening this year, people just aren't talking about it, but the NBA's training camp is set to begin in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks. And there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen in between that. With cases, COVID-19 cases skyrocketing across the country, players should be reporting into camp within 3 weeks, which means within, I don't know, the next 10 days, less than 10 days, they probably need to start quarantining. Well, they've already had a short offseason. They already have had to isolate and quarantine themselves inside the Disney World bubble. They get a couple weeks out. Now you're telling them to not do. And then on top of that, if you go back to the bubble, there was a lot of players that tested positive when they brought everybody back. There was a lot of, it wasn't just the Nuggets, players all over the league, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, players all over the league weren't able to arrive inside the bubble on time. I look at this and I go, okay, cases are worse. You're more likely to get COVID right now than at any point previously this year. You're more likely to get it, and we're asking players to come back in 3 weeks to start training camp, and then 3 weeks after that start the regular season. I'm not, and there's no bubble this time. Players free to kind of go about their business. I kind of think that we're not talking about this enough. I think this might be a really messy year in terms of, I just think guys are going to show up with COVID.
So I think I have to be careful about this in terms of how it's discussed because of the levels of how this. No, you know what? Screw it.
We got to be honest, Matt. We got to be honest about this.
Yeah, this country, we normalized it, and I knew that we were back in April was when we decided not to go with a full-on plan for getting this thing under control, which we had the resources and migration opportunity to do so. We had the technology and for like communication, and we had the infrastructure that was all available, and we did not choose that path. We chose the path that we did. And when we did that, that was a signal that the plan eventually was to try and normalize it. And that's what has been attempted, is like, life goes on, can't let it affect us, have to live our lives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And even at this point, the experts are like, no, there's no reason for a lockdown now. We've already screwed it up. Like, it's like, this is one of the things everyone's like, why don't we just lock down again? And every epidemiologist is like, it's too late.
Right.
We're way past that point. You're not going to be able, unless you're going to do it for 2 months, which we're not.
Right. We're not.
We're going to have games canceled like the NFL has had, like MLB. We're going to have, part of it is the inherent this is one of the reasons I'm really bothered by we're going to do 72 games and we're going to try and fit it in before the Olympics. Like, this just really bothered me because inherently what you're going to have to do there is you're going to have back-to-backs.
Right.
And that means that you're going to fly in one day and fly out the next. And in that period of time, somebody can pick up COVID, develop symptoms at that moment that they get on the first plane. And that by that time, all right, we're in business. That's it. Like that plane. And then everyone that they play, like I think football has done well in not spreading it between players. Basketball is a different sport in terms of the equipment. It's different sport in terms of, obviously football is a contact sport, but it's like, it's an impact sport versus rubbing up against one another to put it
for 48 minutes. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of close contact, whereas in football, maybe it's a lot less, you're coming into contact here.
And you got face masks. And also, like, I'll be very honest with you. Like, we're talking about this before the show started. Like, there's just weird ways that the disease works. Like, sometimes it gets some people and not others. Like, it's just kind of weird.
And so here's the thing, though, I'm thinking about, Matt, because I'm thinking specifically about how this affects the NBA and affects this season. And I want to throw aside the very real possibility that a player has like significant injuries from this. It's just something. God forbid a player has to go to a hospital or something like that. Let's set that aside for now and pretend that's not a possibility, even though it is. Just the idea that this is a 72-game season. What happens if Jokic, Murray get it? And they have to quarantine for 10 days, 14 days. And we're in a 72-game season. That's 7, 8, 9 games they're going to miss. I mean, that's such a large sample of the season that if any key players, maybe it works its way all the way through a roster and you end up losing 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys. What is a team to do? It only has to happen 1 or 2 times for this entire season to kind of fall apart. And I'm just saying I'm concerned about it. We haven't talked about it. I don't want to be the doomsday sayer. The NBA did a great job in the bubble. I think that they're going to put themselves in a very good position with this. But at the end of the day, we're talking about 400 players plus staffs traveling and doing all these things. It's impossible we're going to have some hiccups in the season based on COVID.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a mess. It's just going to be a mess. And everyone's worried about it, and everyone's scared about it, and no one knows what to do because we didn't do anything about it. And so here we are, and it's just like you're not going to give up on $5 billion. That's not a thing. And so the games are going to go on. And I mean, the Thunder have talked about they're going to have fans. Like, it's just going to be a mess.
I'm really concerned about that one. I don't want to dwell on it. Not because I don't think it's worth dwelling on. Like, I think it's a real concern that people aren't talking about. And I want to put that out there, but at the same time, that one to me goes in its own separate box. These other ones, are important, but they're not quite like that one to me in terms of like that could completely derail this entire experiment and really hurt the NBA for years and years to come if it should happen. But number 2 on here is just the bad level of play. The bubble, I thought, was a fantastic level of play relative to what my expectations were. So maybe I'm sounding the alarm when I shouldn't be here, but I think one thing we learned with this bubble was that travel is worse than every other thing that we do. Back-to-backs. I would even say, this might sound like a hot take, a back-to-back inside a bubble, I think that's actually not that big of a deal. Players go home, they rest, they don't travel, they don't do anything, they get back up and they play. I don't think that's that big of a deal. This year, you're going to have a very condensed schedule. And I just worry that some of these games, maybe not the first week, but before too long, we're going to have some games where like, my God, the basketball is ugly this season. Lockout on steroids. We had such an opportunity to do the opposite. This is what upsets me about the money being the only factor. And I'm a realist, so I get it. It's just a bummer as somebody that wants to see the NBA be the best product it can be. I don't care about ratings. I care about the NBA product being the best it can be. The bubble was a great product, though. I just want to put that out there because to me, it was a great product. Yeah, it was. But this is my point. We just saw this awesome product where all the teams were invested and all the teams cared and all the teams were rested and the stakes were high because they had only 8 games in order to figure out the playoff seeding. And half of them were trying to get in and there was going to be a playoff and you only had to get within 4 games. There were stakes. There was rest in terms of not having to travel. They were playing every other day, which is exhausting, but there was no travel, which like every study we've done shows how bad that is. And
we're going to have the opposite of that. We're going to have too many games with back-to-backs, with travel, under COVID restriction, like with COVID complications, trying to cram it in. Like, it just, if you would shorten this, somebody once told me that the ideal that they kind of figured out that they know they can't get to is 57. Like, that's the one that's been mentioned before, is like 57. And that, like, there are people that be like, that's not nearly enough or whatever. But like, to me, that sounds pretty good. And like, there was such an opportunity to go more and be like, look, we're going to do a lesser season, but we're going to like really ramp up. Like, they had talked about like the tournament concept and like all of these things in order to make up some revenue. And instead they went with the same thing. This is going to be like, I had two different GMs. I say to me, my biggest, like, that their second concern behind COVID was they're like, the basketball is going to be shit. It's just going to be shit. Yeah. Like, the guys are going to be exhausted. How are you supposed to get, and then like a lot of guys have mentioned, travel, COVID concerns, like all the distractions. It's a heavy time in the world in general. Like all of these things combined, it's just, we're not going to be getting the best out of them. The bubble showed what happens when we give NBA players an opportunity to give their best. And honestly, it was like too much because they didn't have anything else to do but play. But it was not mentally good for their mental health. But now it's like they're going to be going through all this other stress, and they're trying to play all these games in between. Injuries are going to be up because you both have guys that have not played in so long that there's going to be an increased injury risk. Like, that's been a concern I've heard. And you have obviously teams like the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Heat, and the Celtics that just came off of playing, and there's injury concerns there. Like, it's basketball. We'll be grateful. It should have been the reward for a functioning society. And instead, it's just like, it's a reward we give ourselves because we want it. But it's going to be a mess. I absolutely agree with you. Let's take a break.
You went full Debbie Downer. I want to just point that out there because this is very concerns, and I do think it's a problem, and I am very worried about it. But it's still basketball. It's still competition. There's still going to be an opportunity. And let's be honest, the bubble surprised us. Like, the bubble was better than we thought. So I want to put that out there. But it's also worth noting, we're getting all excited and we're doing all this stuff, but there's part of me that goes, it's going to be tough, man.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. All right, let's take a break and we'll come back and we'll talk about your final three concerns. We'll talk about those when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for making this part of your day. Final segment with Adam Mares, world's finest, as the NBA season starts to rapidly approach, which I am not at all prepared for in any way, shape, or form. Adam, we'll be talking more draft this week, next week, leading up to the draft. But we're talking about our big concerns for the NBA season. You mentioned COVID. You mentioned the quality of play. What's your third concern about this?
So my third one here, this is an Adam special. Concerned about the Lakers stacking the deck. I'm concerned. I want you to understand something. I'm concerned about this all the time. And look, they did stack the deck. They've got LeBron and Anthony Davis, two top 5 players on their team. I'm concerned about them stacking it even more. You already mentioned the luxury tax thing. Well, the Lakers can spend a lot of money. They don't care about a luxury tax, especially if you get a discount on that tax. I'm also concerned because we just talked about how there aren't that many great free agents, and maybe teams aren't looking to spend or this or that, or teams getting off of it. The Lakers are so prime position to take advantage. They're like the like the greedy banker that sees somebody about to be foreclosed, like, hey, well, why don't we just put you even more in debt here? We'll save you in this one instance. And I just feel like the Lakers are primed to do that. So I'm concerned about this.
No, you're confused. LeBron used to play for Dan Gilbert. Dan Gilbert did that.
No, because look, Tristan Thompson. I hear Nuggets fans keep telling me Tristan Thompson would be a great fit. He would. I don't think he's going anywhere but the. Hopefully, I'm wrong about that. I even look at players like Danilo Gallinari. Would he go to Los Angeles, recoup some of that money he might have lost? Maybe he says, "Well, I'm not going to get $18 million a year this year anyway. I might as well go to LA and recoup some of that." So I'm just worried that the Lakers are going to walk in with just this incredible team next year. And this will be a crisis that the rich get to prey on.
So, do you remember Ronny Turiaf?
Of course.
Okay. Ronny Turiaf, after the Lakers, he signed a massive deal based pretty much solely off of his time with the Lakers. There was, when the Lakers in 2009, 2010, there was this free agency effect we used to call it the Laker effect, which is just, you're on the star-studded championship team, and that gets you paid. There is also, and so team like guys will, I think, sign up for that. I also think, on the other side here, I will kind of like alleviate some of this. Because they won, they are more likely to do things like keep Marcus Morris. And I don't think Marcus Morris necessarily helps them or is like the great player for them.
Maybe, yeah.
Kyle Kuzma wants an extension. We talked about that. Like Kyle Kuzma wants that money. And again, it's like, yeah, but you want a championship with him, right? And, Clutch may feel differently about this. That's definitely possible. But since they actually run the team. But like, I don't have any sort of like, I think it's I'll also say this. I don't have a lot of trust in the players that LeBron wants. Like LeBron wants JR and
yeah.
Like, so I think there's a chance that some of this could backfire. It didn't last year for very specific reasons, but I also just think that like, will the Lakers stack the deck? And I don't think they can stack it much more than you would expect. Like you're not going to be like
maybe.
I'll say this, like I can't see something happening like, Chris Paul like says like takes a buyout.
Yeah, not like that. Yeah.
Like that. It's like you're not going to add like
the Gallinaris of the world, the Tristan Thompson, these guys that are really good that would help a bunch of different teams just all going to the. I'm just worried. I don't want to dwell on it too much because again, I don't want to be too. This is a Debbie Downer episode anyway, and I don't want to be too Debbie Downer here. But my next one on my list is a lopsided schedule, and this one's really interesting because the NBA hasn't released their schedule yet. I don't know when we should expect that. I mean, before training camp? Is it realistic to think that teams will go into training camp without knowing what their schedule is? This is such a weird season we're in. But if the NBA does circle back to some of these ideas about playing multiple games in a row in certain cities and doing this, or maybe you play your division a little bit more than usual, then who's in your division, who they pair you with for these series games becomes increasingly more important because if you're end up having to play more games against, say the Warriors or against the Lakers or Clippers, that's a huge disadvantage as opposed to, guess what, Atlanta Hawks, you get to play, 8 games out of 72 against, your horrible Florida duos down there, or your Florida team. I just don't know. So the schedule, I'm worried that it's going to come out and you're going to look at it and go like, oh, wow, there's real meaningful advantages built into this schedule.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it at this point. I think I think that, look, your schedule is going to be a little bit lopsided anyway in the Western Conference. I think it's like, I'd be interested to see whether they're going to add division games. I think that'd be interesting to be like, I personally think it'd be smart because one, it cuts down on travel. If you cut out some of the Eastern Conference, because like when I started to really look at things, the non-conference games really are the ones that matter the least. Like they don't matter that much. And so, it would be definitely tough for the Western Conference teams and they would definitely complain, but there is a certain level to which I've heard of everyone being like, yeah, there's gonna be things we're not going to like. And we just have to suck it up. Like everyone said that, like we're just gonna
again, for me, it's more just about the fairness of it. And then if you played a 1,000-game season, everybody's schedule would be more or less even. It may be a slightly one game better, for here or there, but it'd be mostly the same. The shorter you cut that season down, the more it becomes unfair. So 72 games, I just think that there might be a little bit of an advantage. And I'm not even saying this might benefit Denver.
Yeah.
Not hurt them. It might actually benefit Denver in this instance, but I'm just saying I'm worried about it.
Well, two things. One, I think anything that puts the Nuggets in adversity and makes them try is good for them. Two, I think it's very likely that we're going to see the return of back-to-back games in Denver, which we have seen a decrease of rapidly over the last 5 seasons as the NBA has really tried to get teams away from that dreaded altitude back-to-back. We're going to see the return of those this season, and so those are going to be games that Denver needs to win. But there will definitely be advantages, I think, for the Nuggets through some of this.
And the last one on my concern list, and this is obviously the most likely. I think the COVID thing is more serious, but this one the more likely. It's just injuries. 72 games in a condensed part. Some of this, I think, Matt's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's injuries every year, and there's injuries to high-profile players every year. And the first guy that goes down to an injury, everybody's going to say, "Oh, the schedule," as if that doesn't happen every year to somebody somewhere in the NBA, or sometimes some years to lots of players. And so there's just bad years sometimes for injuries. But this is one in particular where I look at it and I go, what happens if a contending team, let's say Dallas has expectations this year. What happens if Dallas starts a little slow, Maybe they get an injury, a twisted ankle from Luka Doncic. They started 0-3. Now over their next 10 games, Luka misses and they end up going 3-7 there. All of a sudden you look at the schedule and you go, we have 50 games left. We're in 11th place. Like everybody's got to play. We planned on load management throughout the season. None of that, because we're so far behind after 2 weeks of season that we have to sprint the rest of the way. I just think that puts teams in really, really tough position. So injuries, they could become a storyline this year that I really hope they don't.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were injuries in the bubble. Will Barton, obviously, being one of them. Gary Harris was banged up.
Both those guys prior to the bubble, though.
Right. Domantas Sabonis got hurt in the scrimmage games.
Yeah. Was there any other? I'm trying to think, too. I mean, I know Jamal Murray wore down, but I think
there weren't a ton. And a lot of that, again, has to do with the travel and the rest. It's impossible to have an NBA structure that's built the way that would be ideal for the basketball. Like the bubble, honestly, to me is like when things go back to normal, whatever that looks like in the future, quote unquote. Like I honestly think that one of the reasons I'm very high on the tournament concept now is because I do like the idea of like no travel. You get everybody in Vegas. The players get to actually go to Vegas and enjoy themselves and not be locked in a Disneyland resort playing pickleball. But you don't have the travel. Everybody gets to go back to their room after a game and like, I want to focus. I'm not going to go screw around. I think we're going to get the best basketball out of those scenarios that we're going to see in the coming years. I think that part of that is because of the injury stuff, and it allows guys to go harder. Like when guys aren't worried about injury, they go harder, and going harder is better basketball. So this is all wrapped up. Like your point about the quality of play directly ties into the injury. Yeah. Guys are like, my ankle does not feel good. My Achilles is sore. I'm not going to go. Like, I am not going to chase down this loose ball. I am not going to, absolutely scream down the court. And this stuff all adds up, and it's a bummer. But this is, again, a lot of this is just like it's just really funny because it's like, yeah, but we still get basketball. And that's like the fan side of it. And the players and coaches and team side of it is just like, we get the money. Let's suck it up. And we'll just get through this. It's going to be, it turns out the global pandemic that's killed over 210,000 American citizens is also going to have ripple effects through sports. And part of that is just like, it sucks, but this is just how it's going to have to be. But, in the end, the championship will count the same as any other. And that's what everybody's in pursuit of. It's a good distraction.
For sure. These are concerns. We don't have to dwell on them, but they are concerns. I just wanted to put them out there because I feel like there's been nothing but the excitement. And it's like, hey, let's just know we're wading into some tough waters here.
Don't forget it's 2020, Adam Mares. That's the
for just a little bit longer, man. Just for a little bit
longer. Close. We're so close. We're so close. All right, that's gonna wrap it up for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to follow the show, rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to follow Adam's work along with all the great guys at DNVR. You can check me out at the Action Network. Until next time, thanks for joining us on Locked On Nuggets.